With her daughter Winona by her side, Naomi dominated the airwaves in the 1980s and 90s, racking up #1 hits, Grammy Awards, and sold-out tours. Their story seemed like a fairy tale, two women, mother and daughter, overcoming hardship to achieve the American dream. But fairy tales, as we often learn too late, rarely tell the whole truth. What millions didn't see was the private battle Naomi was fighting long after the stage lights went down, a battle not against fame or failure, but against her own mind. For decades, Naomi struggled with severe treatment-resistant depression. In interviews, she spoke of her mental health challenges with surprising honesty, revealing that behind her glowing stage presence was a woman suffering in silence. It wasn't just depression. Naomi also battled anxiety, bipolar disorder, and the lingering emotional scars of a troubled childhood. She carried trauma that fame and fortune could never fully erase. And while fans celebrated the Judds' legacy, Naomi was quietly slipping deeper into despair. When Naomi passed away in April 2022, just one day before the Judds were set to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, the world was devastated. But as the details surrounding her death began to emerge, shock turned to heartbreak. The official autopsy confirmed what had already been reported: Naomi Judd died by suicide. But the report didn't stop there. It disclosed graphic and painful details, including self-inflicted gunshot wounds and evidence of past self-harm, revealing a long-term struggle that few fully understood. These physical scars painted a portrait of a woman who had been suffering deeply long before the world ever knew. Perhaps the most haunting detail was the alleged suicide note found at the scene. According to reports, the note appeared to place blame on her daughter Winona. While the contents of the note were never fully released to the public, the mention of Winona added another layer of tragedy to an already devastating situation, hinting at unresolved tension and emotional distance that had plagued their relationship for years. While the world adored the harmony of the Judds on stage, the truth behind the curtain told a very different story, a story of emotional distance masked by shared success. Naomi and Winona's relationship was built on love, but it was also layered with years of frustration, misunderstandings, and unspoken pain that fame only made more complicated. From the beginning, their dynamic was far from typical. Naomi wasn't just Winona's mother, she was her manager, her business partner, her public image protector. Every decision, from what songs they performed to how they appeared in public, filtered through Naomi's hands. For Winona, this often felt suffocating. She wasn't just trying to find her voice in the music industry, she was trying to find her voice as a person, separate from the image her mother had so carefully crafted. And yet breaking free wasn't simple. The Judds were a brand. They were marketed as inseparable, as the perfect mother-daughter duo. But behind the scenes, that brand came with pressure to perform, to succeed, and to keep their personal struggles hidden. Winona often described feeling like she was living in her mother's shadow, battling to define herself while carrying the weight of their public identity. As Winona grew older, their personal clashes became more frequent. There were reports of heated arguments, periods of estrangement, and emotional confrontations that never fully resolved. While Naomi often spoke in interviews about their bond, those closest to them knew their relationship had long been strained by power struggles and unhealed wounds. Still, despite the tension, Winona never stopped trying. She once described their connection as complicated but unbreakable. But even the strongest ties can fray under the pressure of decades of emotional distance. And when Naomi passed, Winona was left not only with grief, but with the heavy silence of things left unsaid. Questions she would never get to ask. Apologies she would never get to give or receive. This is where the pain becomes personal, not just for Winona, but for anyone who's ever had a complicated relationship with someone they love. Because the hardest part of losing someone isn't just the loss itself, it's the unfinished chapters, the unresolved tension, and the realization that time ran out before healing could begin. While the world focused on Naomi's tragic final moments, another quieter drama was unfolding, one that didn't make as many headlines but spoke volumes about the depth of the family's pain. Naomi's two daughters, Winona and Ashley, despite being united by blood and loss, seemed to be living on opposite emotional planets. Ashley, the younger of the two, had long distanced herself from the chaos of their family's public life, while Winona stayed tethered to the music that made them famous. Ashley carved her own path in Hollywood, becoming an acclaimed actress and humanitarian. But fame in both their worlds couldn't erase the dysfunction they grew up with. In fact, it often made it worse. Years before their mother's death, Ashley had openly discussed their family's troubled past. She spoke of generational trauma, emotional neglect, and abuse, issues that had haunted their household long before the fame arrived. While Naomi and Winona often presented a united front on stage, Ashley frequently stood apart, her relationship with both of them strained by years of emotional distance and conflicting narratives. After Naomi's passing, many expected the sisters to find comfort in each other. But according to insiders, their grief only magnified the emotional walls they had already built. Publicly, they appeared side by side at the Country Music Hall of Fame induction, holding hands through tears. But privately, sources suggest that deep-rooted issues remained unresolved, issues far bigger than a single tragedy could mend. Winona, carrying the immense responsibility of continuing the Judds' legacy, reportedly felt isolated in her grief. Ashley, though heartbroken, seemed to process the loss more intellectually, focusing on advocacy and awareness rather than public mourning. While Naomi Judd's voice soared on stages around the world, behind closed doors she was battling something far more consuming than any critic, chart position, or career setback: her own mind. Fame had opened doors she never dreamed of, but it also locked her inside a world where expectations were relentless, privacy was scarce, and every mistake felt magnified under a public microscope. Long before mental health became a mainstream conversation, Naomi had already been living in its shadow. She once described depression not as sadness, but as a dark, smothering cloud that made her feel disconnected from everyone and everything. It wasn't a temporary mood or something she could simply snap out of, it was a lifelong fight. One made even harder by the demands of keeping up a public image of joy, strength, and resilience. In interviews, Naomi bravely admitted that while fans saw her as a pillar of strength, she often felt like she was crumbling on the inside. The pressure to be Naomi Judd of the Judds never really let up, even after she stepped away from the spotlight. Fame had become a golden cage, trapping her between public adoration and private despair. Every time she put on her makeup and walked onto a stage, it was as if she was wearing a mask, one that hid her darkest fears from the world, and sometimes even from herself. And while mental health treatment has come a long way, Naomi faced a brutal reality: her condition was resistant to medication and therapy. In one candid moment, she revealed that despite trying countless treatments, antidepressants, therapy, and even electroconvulsive therapy, nothing seemed to fully lift the crushing weight of depression. This wasn't just emotional pain. It was biological, chemical, and deeply rooted. The heartbreaking truth is that Naomi's story could have belonged to anyone. Mental illness doesn't care how many fans you have, how much money you make, or how many standing ovations you receive. It doesn't pause for red carpets or award shows, and it certainly doesn't vanish when the cameras stop rolling. But perhaps the most dangerous lie fame tells is that being successful somehow makes you immune to suffering. Naomi's life, and ultimately her death, shatters that illusion. She reminds us that no one is too famous, too talented, or too beloved to struggle. In fact, sometimes the pressure of having to appear perfect makes that struggle even more unbearable. Today, Winona continues to perform, honoring her mother's legacy with every song. Ashley continues her advocacy work, speaking out about mental health and family trauma. But the pain of losing Naomi, and the questions that remain, will likely stay with them forever. The Judd story is not just about music. It's about love, loss, and the invisible battles we all fight. It's about the families who smile for the cameras but struggle behind closed doors. And it's about finding the courage to talk about the things that scare us the most.